The board expected Orson Keel to surrender when CEO Aurelia Strain gave him a choice: approve 40 emergency bridges or leave the company before lunch. Orson was a single father with a mortgage, an 11-year-old daughter, and no wealthy family waiting behind him. Still, he removed his engineering seal from the table, returned to his glass-walled office, and began packing. The room fell silent only after corporate counsel explained what Aurelia had overlooked. Without Orson's independent certification, not one bridge could legally leave the yard. But the real shock would come hours later, when a cold saltwater test proved why he had been willing to lose everything. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? At 7:10 on Monday morning, Orson Keel stood beneath a suspended bridge section and ran one bare fingertip along a silver line in the paint. The line was thinner than a hair. It curved away from the welded hinge plate on span Unit 17, one of 40 folding pedestrian bridges being built for coastal towns before hurricane season. When deployed, each aluminum structure could cross a washed-out road in less than 6 hours. Children, paramedics, and supply crews would trust those hinges before they ever saw the company logo. Orson marked the area with blue inspection tape and stepped back. At 40, he was the principal structural engineer at Northline Span Systems. He had a heavy-limbed swimmer's build, careful hands, and a habit of carrying 2 sharpened carpenter's pencils, even though most calculations now lived on tablets. He was also raising his 11-year-old daughter, Nell, alone. Her school bridge model sat on his office shelf. She had built it from cedar strips and tied a single blue cotton thread between its upper corners. The thread was not structural. It simply made twisting visible. If one side of the little bridge moved before the other, the thread pulled into a diagonal. Orson looked from the hairline mark to the test log. The hinge plate had passed load inspection at room temperature. The contract, however, required repeated cycling after cold saltwater exposure. The lab had completed only half of those cycles because a refrigeration pump failed Friday night. Production called the paint line cosmetic. Orson called it unverified. By 8:30, Aurelia Strain had summoned him to the boardroom. The 34-year-old CEO wore a crimson suit, sharp enough to look like armor. She had taken control of Northline 18 months earlier, after a delayed product launch nearly destroyed the company. Since then, she had refinanced the factory, preserved 600 jobs, and won the emergency bridge contract that could secure 5 years of work. The first shipment was due Wednesday. Around the walnut table sat finance, operations, legal, and 3 outside directors. A storm map glowed on the wall. The circles moving toward the coast made every delay feel immoral. Aurelia asked Orson whether the bridges were safe. He answered carefully. The completed data did not show failure. It also did not satisfy the required test conditions. He would not seal the release until a replacement refrigeration unit finished the cold cycle. Operations said the replacement would take 4 days. Finance said 4 days could trigger a lender review. One director reminded everyone that towns were already clearing deployment sites. Orson understood every pressure in the room. None of it changed the missing test. He placed 3 photographs beside Aurelia, the paint line, the weld toe beneath it, and a microscopic image showing the beginning of material separation. "You are asking us to lose the contract over a mark in paint," Aurelia said. "I'm asking for the test we promised to perform." Her jaw tightened. Aurelia's father had once run a marine hardware business. He delayed a launch for 9 months, chasing smaller and smaller imperfections. By the time he approved the product, a competitor owned the market, and the family company collapsed. Aurelia had spent her adult life learning that hesitation could destroy honest work as surely as recklessness. Orson did not know that history. He only saw a CEO treating uncertainty like disobedience. She slid the release document across the table. "The program has been approved. Do as I said, or leave." No one raised a voice. Orson looked at the storm map. Then he looked at the photograph of the silver line. He removed his steel engineering seal from its leather case and placed it beside the unsigned report. "Then I leave." He returned to his office before fear could negotiate with him. His desk held 12 years of ordinary life, a spare shirt, cold coffee, 3 technical manuals, Nell's cedar bridge, and a framed photograph from her 5th grade science fair. He packed the manuals first, then the photograph. The little bridge went on top, its blue thread trembling as he lowered it into the box. Through the glass wall, people pretended not to watch. Orson carried the box back through the boardroom because it was the shortest route to the employee elevator. Aurelia remained at the head of the table. Corporate counsel stopped reading the contract. "There is a problem," she said. "Northline could replace an employee. It could not transfer a professional engineer's seal, personal liability, or independent judgment. Every qualified engineer who reviewed the incomplete file would face the same missing cold cycle data. Shipping without a seal would violate the municipal contracts and the company's insurer requirements." The room became completely still. Orson did not enjoy the silence. He adjusted the box against his chest and left in time to collect Nell from school. Aurelia stopped the shipment at 11:46. It cost her the lender call she had feared. It also bought the company 4 days. She ordered an independent laboratory to repeat the full test. No Northline executive could select the sample or adjust the procedure. The lab chose span unit 17, lowered its hinge assembly into 4-degree saltwater, and began cycling the bridge under controlled load. Aurelia watched from behind safety glass. For the first 6,000 cycles, nothing happened. At cycle 6,312, the silver paint line returned. At 6,400, a crack opened beneath the weld toe. The rig shut down automatically. No person was near the structure. No bridge had left the factory. The failure was contained to steel, sensors, and a truth that could no longer be called hesitation. Aurelia sat alone in the observation room after everyone left. Orson had not embarrassed her. He had not threatened the board or leaked the dispute. He had simply refused to attach his name to evidence he did not have. She reviewed the manufacturing file herself. The cause appeared in an attachment filed under maintenance rather than materials. A subcontractor's heat treatment furnace had failed for 3 days. To preserve the schedule, replacement hinge plates were treated at a second facility using an older cooling profile. The change was disclosed, but the notice never reached engineering because the purchasing system classified it as a vendor location update. No secret saboteur, no forged signature. One badly categorized change had crossed 5 departments without anyone asking what it did to metal in cold salt water. Aurelia called Orson that evening. He was at his kitchen table helping Nell repair the cedar bridge. The blue cotton thread had loosened when one glued joint shifted. His daughter held the model square while he reset the brace. Aurelia did not ask him to return as an employee. She told him the test result, accepted responsibility for the ultimatum, and offered him an independent consulting agreement to review the failure. He would report to a temporary technical committee led by an outside engineer, not to her. Orson listened without rescuing her from the apology. He gave 4 conditions. The shipment remained suspended. Every client received a factual notice. Hourly workers kept their scheduled pay during the shutdown. And the final redesign would be reviewed by an engineer who had never worked for Northline. Aurelia agreed to the first 3 immediately. The 4th required board approval. "Then call me when you have it," Orson said. The approval arrived the next morning. Orson returned wearing a visitor badge. His old office had not been touched, but he worked in the materials lab instead. Aurelia joined the failure review without taking the chair at the head of the table. She asked questions, wrote answers, and did not turn urgency into authority. The team traced the crack to a combination of the altered cooling profile and a sharp transition at the hinge plate. Either factor alone stayed within tolerance. Together, under cold, repeated load, they concentrated stress at the weld. The fix was not a single heroic idea. Materials specified the correct heat treatment. Welding softened the transition. Structural engineering added a small diagonal gusset. Quality changed the document system so process changes reached licensed reviewers before production. Nell's cedar bridge model came to the lab one Saturday when her school closed for teacher training. She tied the blue thread across the redesigned model and showed Aurelia how twisting pulled it sideways. The child had not solved the engineering problem. She had made it easy to see. Aurelia asked permission to use the model in training. Nell agreed in exchange for a hard hat that actually fit. Over the next 10 days, Orson saw a different side of the CEO. She ate vending machine soup beside the night shift. She called each coastal client herself and described the delay without hiding behind legal language. When the lender demanded layoffs, she postponed her executive bonus and used an unused contingency line to protect hourly pay. She did not become gentle. She became precise. Orson respected that more. The redesigned hinge passed 10,000 cold saltwater cycles, then 20,000. The independent engineer required destructive inspection of 3 additional samples. All 3 remained sound. The night the final result arrived, Aurelia found Orson alone beside the test rig. He was turning one of his carpenter's pencils between his fingers. "I thought decisiveness meant removing doubt," she said. "Sometimes it means refusing to hide it." Their eyes held longer than the conversation required. Neither of them moved closer. The bridges were ready. The consequences were not finished. Northline delivered the first 12 bridges 19 days late. The coastal towns accepted the delay because Aurelia had notified them before rumors began. The company paid the contractual penalty without blaming the laboratory or the subcontractor. A regional emergency agency adjusted deployment schedules and inspected every unit on arrival. No one celebrated the lost time. They respected the result. The board commissioned a governance review. It found that Aurelia had authority to set deadlines, but no authority to direct a licensed engineer's conclusion. The policy had always said that. The culture had not. The operations director received formal discipline for dismissing the incomplete cold cycle test. Purchasing rebuilt its change alert system. The subcontractor retained the contract only after installing independent process monitoring and paying part of the rework cost. Aurelia kept her position by a narrow vote. She did not ask the board to erase the ultimatum from the record. She asked them to publish the new safety authority chart inside every Northline facility. Engineering sign-off would report to an independent board committee whenever executive pressure created a conflict. Then she offered Orson his job back under that structure. He declined, not to punish her. The days after he packed his desk had shown him how much of his professional identity depended on one employer. He wanted the freedom to say no before a crisis made courage expensive. Orson joined a small engineering cooperative and kept Northline as one client among several. The arrangement protected his independence and let him collect Nell from school 3 afternoons a week. Aurelia approved the contract without negotiating his rate down. Their work remained formal for 6 months. She sent data, not midnight emotions. He returned reports, not invitations. When they disagreed, neither used the boardroom as a weapon. Trust accumulated through ordinary decisions. The first bridge deployed after a tropical storm on a small barrier island. It crossed a washed-out road between the clinic and the ferry landing. Orson arrived for the engineering inspection. Aurelia came to meet town officials and stayed after the cameras left. Nell stood at the edge of the safe zone wearing her fitted hard hat. She watched the bridge unfold while the blue thread on her cedar model pulled tight in the sea wind. The real structure locked into place. Orson checked the hinge plates, diagonal gussets, and bearing seats. An independent inspector repeated the measurements. Only then did they open the bridge to foot traffic. There was no applause arranged for Northline. A nurse wheeled medical supplies toward the clinic. 2 utility workers crossed in the opposite direction. A woman held a child's hand over the narrow gap where the road had disappeared. The bridge did what it had been built to do. Aurelia stood beside Orson after the officials departed. "Your daughter asked if I'm still your boss," she said. "What did you tell her?" "That I never should have tried to be your conscience." Orson looked toward Nell, who was explaining the blue thread to an inspector twice her height. "That sounds like a CEO answer." "I have a non-CEO question." Aurelia asked him to dinner. Orson did not answer until they returned home. He reviewed the cooperative's conflict policy, disclosed the invitation to the independent committee, and confirmed that Aurelia would have no role in selecting or paying him. Then he called her. Their first dinner happened at a harbor restaurant with scratch tables and excellent chowder. Aurelia wore no red suit. Orson left both carpenter's pencils in the truck. They spoke about their parents, his fear during the elevator ride after resigning, and the old family business that had taught her to treat hesitation as failure. The conversation did not repair everything. It made honesty possible. They moved slowly after that. Aurelia learned that Nell hated being called mature for her age. Orson learned Aurelia kept every difficult board memo but threw away birthday cards before reading them. Nell taught her to build a second cedar bridge, and Aurelia glued one brace crooked. A year after the ultimatum, Northline opened a new independent test hall. The original cedar model stood inside a glass case near the entrance. Its blue cotton thread remained visible, but the plaque carried no heroic story. It explained one simple principle. When a structure twists, someone must be willing to notice. After the opening, Orson returned to the office he had once packed. It belonged to a younger engineer now. His old shelf held current codes and a family photograph that was not his. Nothing waited for him there, and that felt right. Aurelia met him in the empty boardroom. The unsigned release document had been archived. His steel seal belonged in his own case, inside his own bag. Nell waited downstairs with the two cedar bridges, one straight and one slightly crooked. Aurelia reached for Orson's hand only after he offered it. Together, they left the silent room. This time he carried no box.